Oh, yeah, you'll see. All right. Hi, everybody. We are
Hello.
live with my buddy here, Kevin Cosmo, who I just met. But and I also just met him recently because I've been creeping him on YouTube, which is really exciting. And I love everything about you. But why don't you go ahead and just start to introduce yourself to the folks out there, maybe say a little bit about high energy parenting. And then I'm super curious. I mean, I read your story, but just maybe say a little bit about kind of how it started, because I know you weren't always a high energy parent.
You know, it's funny when you look over the interview questions, you see introduction, and I'm a neophyte of these interviews, and you're like, oh, that's easy, but that's sometimes the trickiest part is explaining yourself.
It is.
Well, long and short, the short part of it is that I am currently about to be a medical student, so a medical student over at Western University, and I got to that path um, and pursued health when I first became a parent, and that's kind of how high energy parenting eventually came about. And I realized in my beginning of parenting that I was unaware of how to take care of myself, much less how to take care of somebody else. And yet I wanted to live a long, healthy life. So I pursued health as the prerogative. And thankfully, I came across a lot of great mentors along the way and got a really good, healthy model that works for myself, works for my clients, seen it work for a bunch of other people, hundreds of other people, and through my mentors, thousands of other people. And the message of high energy parenting is that health and high energy is something that all parents deserve to have. And it's something we really need to have if we want to have healthy children, which all parents do. And if we want to enjoy the time with our children, then we have to have a decent amount of energy because children require a lot of it. I've got 4 running around, and each one of them I want to pour myself into and enjoy each bit of time I have with them. And the only way I can do that is if I have my own health and if I have a lot of energy. And so that was the goal of high energy parenting, is how to share that with other people. And I'm still working on how to do that. And these type of interviews hopefully help me get that message out a little bit more.
Yeah, so I was joking with my friend Chris the other day when I was talking about you and coming on, and I was like, yeah, he hasn't met my daughter yet. So her energy is like 10,000 all the time. Yeah. So my question for you, and maybe for other people, because I know it's not really complex, your whole thing, but you do have like 3 elements that you talk about. Well, there's 33 elements, and then there's 3 simple ways. Is that right? What are the 3?
Well, the 3, I'm not sure the ways we're talking about entirely, but essentially there's a 3-step approach I have, but also there's
Maybe that's
3.
it.
I also put out a video about the 3 models of health,
Oh,
and
maybe that's it. I don't know.
there are 3 approaches to health really, and 2 of them are mostly the same. But in the medical model, which can dovetail into our discussion later on about current topics, um, the medical model essentially says what's good for you, what's good for you in health is not necessarily what's good for you in disease. What you do in disease is different from what you do in health. So when when you're healthy, radiation is bad for you, it's poison. But when you have cancer, chemotherapy is the way to go. Drugs are a poison when you're healthy, but when you're sick, it's the way to get you back to health. It's a very confusing model. Um, and then alternatively, there's the alternative model, which still substitutes things in when you have symptoms. When you have a headache, you maybe go get acupuncture or you have color light therapy, but we don't address the cause, which is the health model, the third model, which is we remove causes of disease and we supply causes of health. And you said it's simple, and really it is quite simple. There's a myriad of nuance to it because each of us are individuals in our history. Each of us are individuals in our experience of the world. Each of us are individuals in how we interact with the world, the different thought processes we'll take on, the various ways we'll choose to interact with the world is always going to be different. But what's the same, and that's the part I'm trying to get across, and I wish we could all recognize, is that we're so similar on so many regards. Hence, there's one biology book, there's one anatomy book. They don't keep making different iterations for every individual human being. We all have very similar needs and requisites for health. And once again, if we supply those needs and remove the causes of ill health, then lo and behold, we have health. And so those 33 elements, if you supply those 33 elements, you have health. If you don't supply those 33 elements, you don't have health. And obviously the whole spectrum along that of depending on how you apply it and how you don't apply it. But each of them are equally important. Some of them are fresh air, good, clean water, healthy nutrition, healthy friendships, a career or work that feels meaningful to oneself, vigorous activity, enough sleep. But if you don't get enough sleep, it doesn't matter how great your nutrition is, doesn't matter how great your emotional poise is, doesn't matter how great your work is. Eventually, your lack of sleep will start to deteriorate your ability to maintain a high level of health within the body. And so each of them are equally important. Each of them impact each other. I think most of us have experienced, especially as parents, not getting enough sleep and how that impacts our ability to be present with other people, how that impacts our ability to do work at our highest level, how it impacts our ability to eat healthfully. And so on so many levels, each of them play upon each other. And that's a beauty and a challenge as well.
Right.
If you're struggling in one area, for instance, diet, most people will hone in on one particular thing. I think it's perhaps why I've lacked effect sometimes in my marketing, is that I'm so widespread. I don't pick just diet as the thing, or just nutrition as the thing, or just sleep as the thing. All of it. And so if you're struggling for one thing like nutrition, many people hyper focus on nutrition or hyper focus on work on some of the other ones. And surprisingly, then it becomes easier to have a healthy diet. It becomes easier to move when you have a healthy diet. It becomes easier to eat when you are moving. All those things are easier when you're well rested. All those things are easier when you have a healthy friend circle. So I went on for a little bit there because
no, I like it. I like it. It's good.
I don't want to make it overly simple. It is simple in understanding it. That's the thing to get across. We could complicate nutrition ad infinitum and look at every single micronutrient. But at the end of the day, isn't whole food healthy food? And so what whole foods are we going to eat? That's as complicated as it really needs to be. Every other creature on the planet doesn't have to worry about counting calories and understanding micronutrients and all these different ratios and complex biochemistry ideas. Eat some bananas. Eat some fresh fruit.
Eat some bananas. I love
it. Eat what looks good to you. Eat what you could easily eat in a natural, whole state. And sure enough, that's healthy food. So
yeah. What I love about your 33 elements, this helped me a little bit, is that if you're lacking in one, it throws everything off. But that also freaked me out because then I was like, that's a lot to balance at once in terms of like eating well, sleeping, like it all makes sense, especially like I do movement and mindfulness stuff and all of that. I really focus on the meditation because I feel like the meditation helps all those other elements. But do you have tips for people in terms of how to like balance all that, especially with you're a dad with like 4 children? Or is it super simple? I'm overthinking it.
You're not overthinking it. There are a myriad to pay attention to, as it were. A rose has a certain amount of things to pay attention to, and it's already a complex organism unto itself. But human beings even more complex. As you mentioned, the meditation, the mindfulness, we have a whole nother complex. It seems to be at least different than what I can pick up from a rose of things to be aware of in our and to maintain health within us. So yes, there's more to pay attention to. But when you were kind of mentioning the 3 steps before, that's where I've simplified it because that's all I can really take on. As you mentioned, I'm a father of 4. I have my own business. I'm going to school full time. And so what I do is just do a check-in every 6 months, every year. I'll go through the 33 elements and I'll rate myself 1 through 10. And I have a little worksheet on this called the weak link that's on my website. And so you go through and you rate yourself, and whatever you show up lowest on, your 2 lowest ones, those you're gonna focus on and work on those until they become not your weakest ones. Because whatever your weakest link is, that's really what's taking you down. The strengths are great. Keep them up. Don't let them drop. But don't keep working on a 9, something that's already a 9 out of 10. Your diet, it's perfect, almost perfect. It's great. You can keep improving on it. But if your emotional poise is so poor or your mindfulness is so poor, your nutrition, that's not your main focus anymore then. And so the things that are weakest are where we're gonna break and pull us back down. And so that's what I do. I focus on 2 and I try to strengthen those. And eventually some of them become things you don't have to think about anymore. I don't have to think
Right.
about I don't have to think about fitness. I don't have to think about diet. I don't have to think about a lot of these things that I have set up that just become routine and become things you just find a joy doing. Health is something that's fun to participate in, especially
Yeah.
once you start to see all the rewards of feeling fantastic. So it's manageable. Yeah, there's a lot, but just pick a couple that you're weakest on.
Yeah, that was
Those.
helpful. Okay, that was good because I think you could even do it less than 6 months. Like I would do that a lot. I think, especially in the beginning, of like where do you need
Yeah.
to sort of. But that's not. I love the picking just a few. I can totally do that. All right, let's dive into some stuff that's like controversial because I feel like you have such a perspective on this sort of COVID-19 disease that's happening right now. And you know, it's scientific, you have all the backing, but I think it's a different perspective than some people either disagree or they think you're not paying attention to like the seriousness of it. Um, I, for one, agree with everything that you're saying, but so you don't have to convince me. But and I love that you just were saying things that were resonating with me because I've been thinking what you've been saying for a while, and I'm like, there's a missing link here. Like something's missing. We're not looking at the full picture. And so when I caught your video, I was like, oh, there's someone that's actually looking sort of at like a context of all of this. So say more about your perspective.
Well, I want to say more about it, and I'm just realizing comically that my phone here is not going to have enough charge for this type of behavior. So I'm wondering if
Oh,
I can switch to my computer here that I have set up
yeah,
as a
I
double
think, yep,
backup.
you
So
can. Watch this.
I'm at least prepared.
It's
And
okay.
well, thank you. All right.
Now I got you
So
2 times. I'm going to remove you from here. There we go. I can't hear you though.
Okay, I said it was
Okay,
almost flawless. I said it was almost flawless, and as I'm saying it's almost flawless, I'm creating the flaw. Well, all right. So, my perspective on COVID is one that I want to start off with. Again, it's a weird time, and was my initial sticking point was the weirdness of the discussion and why should a discussion that's about a scientific topic be weird
right.
and have so much uh, politicized and almost religious nature to it. That was when I was initially coming to it without even having an awareness of it, just still knowing I needed to do my homework on it because I could see that it was obviously an issue in society. And so I guess I'm prefacing by saying I honor people's suffering. There's a lot of suffering in the world. I'm going to medical field because I want to help people. And that means all people, regardless of age, regardless of condition, regardless of whether it's COVID or AIDS or starvation or whatever the cause of death is. My job as a medical professional is to avoid that and to have someone live a healthy life. And so I started looking at it scientifically. Admittedly, I have not my head in the sand, but I'm not aware of U.S. politics. I try to keep a larger global perspective. Yes, U.S. politics factor into that, but I'm also paying attention to scientific communities, and so I really just don't have my head in the mainstream. So I was unaware of where my position was aligning at all, and I was just following the science and the data. And I was finding people concerned about an issue and shutting down society over something that seemed to not warrant the same amount of concern that starvation should, or some other clear epidemics in the world should. I mean, just even within the U.S. structure, there's epidemics going on all the time right now, which are childhood obesity, diabetes, heart disease. All these things are lifestyle diseases that even the mainstream medical model cites as lifestyle diseases, things that we could avoid, and yet we're not forcing behavior to do that. So initially, it was a little weird on those levels, and then I started digging and finding a whole host of scientific discussion not making it into mainstream discussion.
Right.
Scientific, there's no one immunity model within the scientific immunological discussion, and yet on the mainstream, it's one way. It's so the immediate running down the path of lockdown and pursuing a vaccine without discussing all the other different conjectures about data collecting. There's no standardized form of death statistics country to country, and yet death statistics are being shouted on the media as if they're fact. And so the lack of discussion immediately was a concern. The ethics of it was a concern about the suggestion going forward about lockdown, about the various medical ethics of forcing vaccinations on people. Going forward, we need to have an open scientific discussion, and that's not happening. And even worse, unfortunately, is that what I'm seeing in the scientific community is a lot of what seems to be clear evidence citing that this is not, thankfully, again, I'm surprised that people don't want good news, but thankfully it seems like the data is supporting that their first projections were way too high, that the death rate of millions is not, we're not going to see that. And even with counting all things as COVID death that we possibly could, it seems, on the mortality statistics, it's just not happening. So I don't know what data we want to point to, but I could point to, I think I have a whole list of studies and links going to other scientific professionals, but there's about 50 different scientific professionals, well-respected epidemiological professionals, immunologists, scientists, doctors, and I'm concerned that similar to the discussion on vaccine, similar to the discussion on many topics, they're just being shuttled to the side, ignored. And it should be concerning to anyone who wants to have science, because science is not a dogmatic belief system. You don't have to believe in science. It's something you practice. Medicine is something you're supposed to be practicing. I can always be wrong, and I'm open to being wrong. Please show me the information. I don't want to be right or wrong. I'm just trying to do the best I can, and I can only do that with the data I have. And right now the data is showing me, thankfully, that I don't have to be scared of COVID, and neither should you be scared of COVID. And if you're healthy, you have no reason to be quarantining yourself inside the house, because that's not what quarantine is. Quarantine is where you have healthy people out and about, and you have sick people put away, or the people who are severely compromised. But if your immune system is functioning, then your immune system should be interacting with the world around you. Otherwise, you're only compromising yourself more at home. And so my position is wholly based on what I can find as science. I can back it up with tiers of science and experts, even though I don't like to do that, because it's a logical fallacy to point to other people and say, well, because he said it's true, that makes it true. But if that's what we're playing, the experts in the mainstream are saying one thing, but there's experts on the same tier saying something else. And I side with those that are saying we should be out and about, we should be exposing ourselves, as we always are, to viruses and germs. And those of us who maintain a healthy internal environment will interact properly with the viruses and bacteria around us, and they will benefit us, because we couldn't live without bacteria, and viruses are part of our own system. If we look up exosomes, it's a really important term. People start to it's a word people have to learn and start using. Our body can produce viruses and bacteria within its own structure when it's unhealthy. And so infection is really possible even without exposure to other people. On many of these diseases we currently think of as communicable diseases, what's most communicable is the behavior patterns and the influences of environmental damage that we suffer. So I'd love to talk about what actually causes disease and what actually brings about health when you are in a state of disease, rather than what's currently being touted as. So I mean, so it's underlying all of this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how health is created and what our interaction is with germs and viruses.
Yeah.
So I know I went deep there, and I apologize for going on a rant.
No, I love it. I love it all. Oh my gosh. So I have like a million questions from that. And I do think we need to talk more about the health and all of that. And I don't.
Because
Go ahead.
I mean, I just want to interject that I don't know the politics of things, and by that I mean I don't want to even. Politics is politics. I don't want to get into that game of trying to guess and figure out conspiracies. All I'm saying is that the data doesn't add up. It's the experts are conflicting with each other, and our understanding of immunity and health is really lacking on this. And those are things I can say with certainty. And
Sure.
so will a vaccine work? I mean, do vaccines work in general is a discussion, much less will a new vaccine being discovered work. But what does work and what can't be disputed is that healthy people do better than unhealthy people when it comes to what they call infectious diseases. And people in cleaner air environments do better than people in unhealthy air environments. And so if we really want to work on creating a healthier society and avoiding death, because we're supposed to be conflating the idea between lockdown and other forms of behavior or models for health is lives versus lives. And so corona lives, but also what about all the other people who are dying of, as we said, all the other epidemics going on, the heart attacks, all the other things that are leaving them susceptible to things like COVID or other types of infectious disease. So if you want a healthy society, create a healthy society. Clean up the water, clean up the food supply, clean up the air, and then you'll have a healthier population, which will do better against any type of infectious disease. And that's undisputed. And so, but that, unfortunately, that doesn't have money in it. There's really no system to cleaning up food and suggesting people eat healthier. This whole thing, unfortunately, in the mainstream, I'm not seeing people being advised to eat healthfully while they stay at home.
True. You actually see the opposite of people are home and they're cooking and they're like, yeah, it's all over the place of I'm cooking all these things, but it's not necessarily very healthy things. It's, almost hoarding of comfort food. Yeah. Which seems to be happening, but there's not a lot of discussion of what that can actually do to you. So, so I do a lot of stuff with people with mental health, and that's kind of my main thing. And I do a lot of with movement and mindfulness stuff. I don't know necessarily nutrition. It's just I don't have enough background in it. So I love connecting with people like you because I know it's part of the whole thing. But I wonder also, you had mentioned, there's so much detrimental stuff that can happen because of the lockdown, because just in humanity in general. What's your major concern about this in terms of people being locked down, in terms of mental health? What are the major results you can see that are going to be so detrimental?
Well, it's already become apparent. I mean, even the mainstream is finally starting to report on it. But honestly, this was the first thing that I had said right off the tip when someone mentioned coronavirus and the potential idea of locking down a society. They had mentioned, I think, that China had done it, and they were mentioning that it might happen here. This was a couple months ago.
Right.
And I said, well, watch the poor people suffer, because that is exactly what happens in these type of behavior patterns. That's why I'm almost considering calling this an elite concern, focusing on COVID when it affects such a small percent of the population, when we have a large percent of the population already suffering. This is going to only affect people who are suffering even more. If you're already poor and you've now quarantined at home, if you already had mental health issues and you're not quarantined at home, if you had drug or alcohol issues and you're depending on going to your AA meeting, well, now you're at home. If you had spousal issues, now you're both at home. Children who would escape to go to school now that dad does not have a job even to distract him. Now he's at home with that kid. He used to beat him up just 1 hour a day. Now he's got access to 14 hours a day. And those things, I mean, COVID, thankfully, this is what the data is saying, but thankfully, in 94% of the cases, 95% of the cases, at least well over 90% of the cases, you recover from COVID.
Right.
Do you recover? I gotta say, thankfully, I don't have a serious experience of child abuse when I was young. But do people recover from those? Those things you're gonna live with those for the rest of your life.
Forever. You're recovering from that forever.
Forever. The suicide rates that have gone up, the children who lost their parent to suicide, or the brother who lost their sister to suicide, these are people that's gonna affect them for life. And so the people who are setting up drug addiction patterns at home, there's an opioid epidemic. Oh yes, that was happening right now too. And so those people remember that one. If we have our heads on a little bit wider, if we're looking at a little bit wider scale than just COVID, there's a lot of people to concern ourselves with. Shutting down hospitals, which we're seeing happen all across the country because, well, it feels like there's not enough demand, and a lot of the doctors are saying that people are fearful of coming in. And so I can't imagine the things that should be addressed that aren't being addressed, and the things that are happening at homes that aren't being addressed as we talk about all these different mental health issues, the amount of old people who are suffering in nursing homes.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a myriad of all the third world countries who are essentially seeming to have been kind of, well, every single power structure in times of chaos tends to grab more power. And so
Right.
all across the globe, many power structures took advantage of this. This okay by the larger first world countries to lock down their citizens, and they said, well, if that's okay, then we'll go ahead here. So on so many levels, and then going forward, what's the precedent being set? If something is benign, and I say benign only because I'm comparing it to the flu, and the flu is not benign. The flu kills 30,000 people in the States every year, 60,000 people in a bad year. And so, but if something even less than that is warranting shutting down the entire economy, shutting down people's freedoms, and surveilling on people and forcing mass vaccination, then what going forward? What's the precedent? Obviously, the flu is warranted for that. Anything that comes up, and every year we have a new iteration of the flu. And so that's just again fact. There's mutations happening all the time. And it's the body that mutates the virus as well. That's something that, again, moving back into health, but
no, that's okay. And I think a lot of people don't know a lot of what you're talking about, health in general, or what a virus is. Like your whole point in one of your videos.
What's a virus?
What is it?
What's a virus? And what is a virus? How does it spread? And whoever is the one suggesting the massive behavior change or that you do something, that's the person who ought to be proving something completely and should be open to all sorts of questions, because they're the ones suggesting the massive something. And so if you're suggesting mass vaccinations or shutting down society, then shouldn't there be a bare minimum that you prove to me that COVID causes, well, I should say that the SARS coronavirus 2 causes COVID-19. If you can't, because I've been looking for that data, and I'm happy if anyone watches this, feel free to find that research paper, because shouldn't that be discussed a lot? Shouldn't that person be well lauded and reported that they discovered this and proved this? This is a fundamental problem in virology, is that, for instance, with COVID, someone can have the virus but not present disease.
Right.
And actually, it happens 94% of the time, 95% of the time.
Right.
Why does that happen? If something truly is a causative agent, and this is what I would cite as the fundamental error in medicine, is that they're looking for a causative agent so that they can point to one specific disease. Specific disease, one specific causative agent, and to be able to run down searching for a cure over and over and over. But one that's really easy to see is, can I cure someone or find a cure for someone with lung cancer who's smoking 2 packs a day?
Right.
You can't cure something that you haven't removed the cause of. And as well, there's not always just a straight line of causality of one thing straight causing the other thing, because some people have smoked cigarettes and lived well over 100 years. Similarly, just the presence of a virus does not cause immediately the disease presentation. But we're finding out people who are in severely compromised conditions, when they interact with this, they seem to present with an inability to handle it properly. And I give an analogy.
Oh, sorry. Like compromised immune system, because that's sort of what I'm finding when I'm looking at it too. It's like specific immune system.
When we say immune system, what is that? And the immune system is comprised, the whole body has elements of the immune system present in it. And when I compromise function in any way within the body, I'm compromising my ability to respond coherently to the world around me, my immune system, my immune function. We often think of it as fighting things off, but I would like to think of it more so as creating coherence, creating an organized pattern. This is going to get deep into a little bit of spirituality to some degree, but also come right back into health.
I love it. Go with the spirituality.
And also tie into the element of lockdown and why we should not be doing this to ourselves if you want to have a high functioning immune system. And each of us recognize when I have a baby downstairs, and that little baby, thankfully, is not depending on me to run its body and its show. There is some fantastic intelligence orchestrating the trillions of cells and the trillions of interactions that are happening every single second. There is so much happening. And that intelligence within each of us is thankfully, if I put a banana into my body, it creates this body. If I put the same banana into that body, it creates my son's body. And so the intelligence is trying to organize whatever elements it has to take in, the substances, forces, influences, and conditions it's interacting with, and create this that is the human body. What a fantastic thing that spirit or intelligence is operating within each of us, and just like magic can turn a banana into body. And so that intelligence is functioning all the time. And what it's doing is even if it's functioning by trial and error, it's still fantastically intelligent, and it has to interact with the world around it. And so when you see a baby, it's not fighting with the world. Its immune system is not fighting with the world. It's interacting with the world. It's touching its mouth and eyes all the time. It's exposing itself to a whole host of viruses and germs and pathogens. But what it does have is a high level of that intelligence and vigor within itself still, that life force within it. And so if you'll see babies or children, they respond vigorously. They put off rashes. They put off fevers. They spit out things. They end up creating symptoms. We call them disease symptoms. But what's really is it's the body organizing itself. It's the body responding to its environment. It's expelling toxins. It's expelling things that do not match this organism. Does not match its level of life within it that's trying to hold. It's homeostasis. So whatever doesn't match, it tries to expel. And it does the best it can to start getting better at recognizing these things. And similarly, as adults even, when we move to a new environment, we might present with symptoms. Is our body beginning to respond and interact with that? That's our immune system learning to respond. The fight thing is not so much the best analogy as opposed to creating harmony, creating coherence within this life system. And so when we disrupt it, when we start to impede this, when we overwhelm its ability through poor nutrition, through excessive stress, through not moving the body, allowing it to move it around these things, move these substances through this organism, when we have excessive emotional stress, etc., we don't get enough sleep to allow recovery. So whenever we violate those 33 elements, and we are stressing it more so, we're adding more toxic load to it, and we're not allowing it time to eliminate its toxic load. So then, as adults, if we can't present symptoms, which are actually elimination presentations, then we start to hold on to toxicity. And that starts to deposit in various ways and accumulate in various forms where we have certain organs not function as they ought to. And so, for instance, you might have diabetic symptoms because your pancreas is now tiring out from overwork and now it's functioning as well, et cetera, et cetera. You continue down these pathways, you can harden these systems even more, and you can create various forms of cancer, various forms of arthritis. And then continuing further down the pathway, you can go into all the things that we consider basically uncurable diseases, dementia, Alzheimer, etc. But they all come back down to that underlying overstressing of the organism. But the actual interaction with potential stressors as viruses and germs is a normal function of the organism. It's a necessary thing for the organism to interact with. And so cooping ourselves up inside is a surefire way that when we go back out, I mean, if you truly are doing such a thing, you will then, when you interact with things, sure enough, your body's going to have to respond by getting rid of them because it's not used to interacting with them in that way, and it's going to really have to reestablish homeostasis, the world around it. And so that's why that's the best.
No, I love it. I love some of the words you said with like harmony and cohesiveness, because that really is sort of when people are off balance, just from my experience with coaching, whether it's nutrition or whatever, that's when things get out of alignment, particularly with emotional responses, but also with diseases, right? So like work a lot of people with in recovery, and this isolation, certainly with, liquor stores being so accessible and people can just get whatever they want, and then now they're in isolation. They're going to come out of this with a really nasty, addictive disease that is forever, which is also your point. Like you don't really recover from. I mean, you can be in recovery, but you always have that element there that now is for life. So I love the thing that you're talking about in terms of cohesiveness, and then allowing the body to, because there is going to be an adjustment period of whenever we get out of this. To going back to places. I even feel different when I go to the store. Like it's I can tell the difference. I mean, emotionally, one is the one I can, my emotions are whacked because I just can't. I'm like so sad that we're in this and people have masks and I can't smile and I can't touch and I can't, share love with my community. Like this is awful. So that whole piece, I just love it is really the mind-body connection, like fully, all of it.
Smiles are on my 33 elements of health. Smiles and gratitude are one of them, and being able to express that joy. I mean, smiles it's demonstrable. Feel free to look up studies on smiles. Yeah, it affects people positively. They affect our immune system positively. Community is necessary, not only for exposure on that base level, but also on that higher level of humanity, of interacting and having that society connection. So on so many levels, I'm with you, Ayana. We need to be interacting with each other and spreading that joy, and actually spreading health. Health is contagious, just as we're seeing fear and diseases.
Yeah. What would you say to people in terms of just final tips or thoughts or ways that they can be healthy in the world, or just anything inspirational that you want to end on?
Sure. Take this extra time right now to get better at understanding health, and take this opportunity to confront things and realize that we can understand these concepts of health and immunity, and basically free ourselves to live healthy lives for an entirety. That's really what's possible for all of us. And so I'm on the optimistic side. I'm optimistic that this can allow a lot of people to confront their version of the health model and see how they want to interact with the world. And simultaneously, hopefully, we create tighter knit communities of people who want to live this way and live healthfully with each other. I'm definitely seeing an increased need within myself to become part of a community that has a greater tie to health as its prerogative, and ethics as its prerogative. And within the states and within many nationalistic structures, I've never really considered myself part of in younger years, I guess, but in my adult life, I have not considered myself part of the U.S. structure. That said, I want to be part of something that actually stands for values that match mine. And if people mention what the U.S. structure does, or other things that people might associate themselves with, Democratic parties or Republican parties still support the U.S. structure. Various other world, Spain, Italy, etc. Pick your country. Do you really want to be part of that type of behavior pattern? Is that country really, in that state, doing really what we want to see as human beings, as far as taking care of each other, and actually not acting in aggressive manners towards people who are being peaceful? Right now, as we're seeing, people aren't allowed to protest, or even if that means just going to the park. People call the police on us for being in the park with a few families. And so is that the type of world we want to live in? Not me particularly. And really, are the results happening in this fantastic first world? Are the results really what we want? That's not what I really pictured for myself or my children growing up. When I compare, I don't know if you know the blue zones, but the blue zones are people, those are areas in the world where people live to 100 years old, pretty reliably. It's a long-lived cultures. And we don't see them, or maybe no, they don't do it because of a mass vaccination route, is it? No. They don't have mass infrastructures of government, and no, they don't have so much of what we laud ourselves for in this first world. They don't have, but they also don't have the high amounts of disease. They don't have high amounts of rampant abuse and mental disorder or the high amounts of stress. And
Right.
so I'm hoping this is a huge pivot point as to where we want to put our attention to and where we want to have our values and how we want to see them play out in the world. I'll give up a lot of my comforts, as it were, for these other comforts. I'd rather be comforted by knowing that, hey, I'm going to likely live to 90 or to 100 in good health, and that, hey, my children are going to have clean water and clean air, and they're going to likely live to 90 or to 100. That's a way better comfort for me than, I don't know, driving a Tesla or even having this computer, or I don't know what levels of giving things up we need to do, as it were. I don't really want to call it giving up because I know what I'm getting. I want to get those securities of clean food, clean water, clean air, reliable health, a healthcare system that actually understands health. How are they going to cite? How is the American Medical Association going to cite poor diet as a primary cause of non-communicable diseases, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, and they don't teach a lick of that in school? How can you cite it as a primary cause? So I want a healthcare system that actually creates health, not just profiting off of people's disease and ill function. So I hope this gives us a better view of what we want to create and be a part of in the world. And it's not giving anything up. We're getting things by dropping this system that is locked in. I mean, I have almost no control of where my food comes from by buying it from a grocery store. I have almost no control of the technology. It's almost all owned by other people. When I'm using an Apple device, I'm very much aware that that data is not mine. It is someone else is using it as well. It's a public device, as it were. And so I want to own things. I want to be, and the things I want to own are my own livelihood and my own freedom to express myself. That's really all I want to own. I don't want to own anybody else. I don't want to own. I want to take care of some land. I don't want to own it. But those things are seemingly at risk here. And so that's why I've become a little bit more vocal in expressing our need to stand up and define what we value and what we respect and what we want to stand for.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
It's been such a pleasure. It's just nice to have another. It's very refreshing, and I just loved your thought process. And yeah, I think people need to hear it a little bit. And I just would say to people that are sitting with this and maybe feel challenged or maybe feel uncomfortable or maybe feel like, I think what tends to happen is when people are hearing something, when they're in such a fear state anyway, their thought process around stuff seems to really hone in instead of open up. So people, you're getting a lot of negativity, I see, just in Facebook and all that kind of stuff, of people sort of lashing out towards it. And I just think it's part of what you've already mentioned in terms of the media has really, really honed in on this on a large scale to fear, which really just it feeds into people's difficult responses to anything. It's almost like the holistic part of the world. That's a lot of what I did with in the beginning of the coaching is, how do you manage fear, and what is that, and what are you looking at anyway, and how can we sort of make that a holistic process? So I would just, for people watching out there, just keep minds open, keep ears open, keep hearts open. Check out Kevin. I put his website up there. All his stuff is on there. So all the 33 elements and all the things that we talked about are up there. He's got a ton of videos as well. If you want to check him out, I highly recommend it. And thanks for being with me today, Kevin.
Thank you for having me on, Ayanna. Really appreciate it.
And I hope we'll be in touch soon.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well.
Bye.